What do mystics, harlots, and heretics have in common? Why on earth would we have them all in one conversation? And how do they all show up inside of you? This is what we're going to talk about today. I have with me Lauren Joyce for the Magdalene interview series. And as you know, I am super giddy about the fact that she's combining all of these things together. If you know anything about me, I'm Melissa Keenan, and I love this so much. So we're going to have such a juicy conversation. Before we dive into getting to know Lauren, I just want to set the stage for the conversation. The Magdalene interview series has been created so that we can widen the conversation around Mary Magdalene, around who she is, and around what it means for us as women and as leaders today, and especially around how we're creating inclusive spaces and how we're really including all women in this conversation as opposed to just a narrow group of women. Mm-hmm. So this is what we're creating, and I've created this also in conjunction with the Magdalene Pleasure Pilgrimage that I'm leading in the south of France in September. And so if the conversation resonates with you, if you're finding yourself feeling called to go and feel the land and feel the codes and do some more of this inner work for yourself, we'd love to have you join us. Please reach out and DM me, and we'd love to have you join us in September. Okay, without further ado, let's dive into this conversation. Lauren, will you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Lauren Joyce, founder of The Magnetic Woman and a Magdalene Priestess, and I help women reclaim their feminine power. And when I say feminine power, I mean true feminine power, not the trad wife bullshit that we're fed as this idea of the feminine, but reclaiming feminine power through pleasure. So I grew up Catholic. I went through 10 years of Catholic school. And my family was not very religious, but my parents were both raised Catholic and everybody went to Catholic school and all the things. So growing up, anything I learned about Mary Magdalene was that she was a prostitute, which is ironic given the fact that the Catholic Church stopped holding that position in the 1960s, but that's what was still being taught in the 90s, right? So I go through Catholic school. Then after Catholic school, I'm like, I don't think I'm religious anymore. There is no God. There is no nothing. Of course, you go the whole other end of the spectrum. And when I was 25, my dad passed away. And I knew I didn't want to go back to church. And at the same time, I was spiritually searching for something. Well, I was searching for a lot of things. And I found myself in Regina Thomas Howard. She's the woman who wrote the book Pussy, a Reclamation. I joined her mastery program in 2013. So I was like 26 years old. I had just lost my dad. I had never done any personal development. I'd never read The Secret, like Law of Attraction, what? I had no idea. And there I was in Regina's classroom where she's talking about pussy and sensuality and sexual energy. And obviously all of my Catholic conditioning comes rearing up, like, get the F out of here. Clearly something deeper in me was like, this is the answer. This is the answer that you never had. So the more I began to learn about pleasure and the feminine, the more I had to confront my own religious conditioning and the narratives from the church and from patriarchal religion. And then that's when I discovered that Mary Magdalene wasn't a prostitute, but was in fact a priestess. And when I learned that she was not just a priestess, but what would have been considered a sacred sexual priestess, so a priestess from the Isis lineage who is trained in practices around sacred sexuality, using your sexual energy, it healed something so deep in me because I was just like, wow, everything I was taught that was sinful, wrong, I should be ashamed of as a woman. Not only is Mary Magdalene the embodiment of it being okay, she's the embodiment of it being holy and sacred. And I was hooked. And now this was back in 2016, 2017. So there was not much about Mary Magdalene out there. Like now it's so beautiful and amazing to see so many women talking about it. There's so many books, there's so many podcasts. There was barely anything. So I just started to piecemeal it together as much as I could.
Right.
And so I've been working with Mary Magdalene. I've considered myself a Mary Magdalene priestess for years now. And to me, my work with her, my connection to her comes through the reclamation of all that is human, like all that makes us a human woman. And especially the things that are taboo, wrong, shameful, sinful. And so for me, my work with Mary Magdalene, my path of devotion with Mary Magdalene is that of pleasure.
Wow, that's beautiful and
Yep.
beautifully shared. I see a lot of my own journey
Mhm.
reflected in what you just shared. Um and I also know there's so many paths to what I guess I want to say what allows us to access that sacred sexuality and also what prevents us from accessing sexuality or even feeling like it's sacred or anything we want anything to do with, which I have some more questions for you around that as we
Okay.
dive
Yeah.
in a little bit deeper. But first, I'd like to ask, what did the women of Mystic, Harlot, and Heretic, what do those represent to you? You've got a program coming up called this,
Yes.
and I was like, I freaking love this title. We need to go
Yeah.
deeper. Mystics, Harlots, and Heretics. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. So mystics, right, are spiritual people, spiritual women, women who have lived some kind of path of devotion, who have are connected to their intuition, and so that term I think has become more and more popular, which amazing because I don't know, not everybody resonates with the words or titles or archetypes of priestess or witch. And so I think mystic can be this beautiful kind of like catch-all word. um Harlots are, of course, the women who, for me, there's two categories. There's the category of women who have been labeled harlots, like Mary Magdalene, as a way to discredit them. And there are the women who were, in fact, harlots, aka courtesans. So, courtesans, where if you look up the definition, it would probably say a high class, high end prostitute. But they were so much more than that. Yes, they did exchange money for acts of intimacy, but they were also paid just essentially for their existence, for their thought leadership, to they would advise, kings and political strategists from behind the scenes. They were women who were educated when most women were illiterate. They were women who had their own wealth when most women were seen as property. Um, and they owned their sexuality as much as they could for like the 14th through 16th, 18th century, in the patriarchy. And heritage.
What culture are you referring to about all of that?
Yeah, I mean, so courtesans or a type of courtesan you will find all over the globe, right? So
Mhm.
in Japan, they would have been known as geishas. But the term courtesan and the ones that I,
Mm.
work with archetypally and are from Western Europe in the 15 to 1800s. So typically France and Italy. And there's famous ones out of England as well. And then heretics, right, again, is a label used to say anything that goes against the dogma of the church. So oftentimes that is women's thoughts, women's spiritual leadership. And as I said, I grew up Catholic. And of course, when you're Catholic, you learn a lot about Catholic saints. And I had this realization within the last year, thinking about Catholic saints and how many, I would imagine, of the women who are Catholic saints, so often they were nuns, and then to become a Catholic saint, there has to be like miracles proved to have been performed, through prayers to you. And I was like, wow, how many of those women probably would have been priestesses if that option would have been open to them? But because the Catholic Church and the Christian Church controlled the majority of the world, the only way to live out their spiritual path, and often a lot of them were mystics. They had visions. They, taught about things that weren't taught in the church, but being a nun or being within Catholicism specifically protected them from being accused of being a witch or being killed. So I think that there's a reclamation that we get to have for what has been negatively labeled, like negatively labeled mystics, harlots, heretics, when in reality it is this wisdom of the feminine that we've been told is so dangerous. It's forbidden. It had to be hidden from us. It had to be oppressed. It had to be suppressed. So for me, again, as a pleasure priestess, that's why I believe courtesans and harlots, actual harlots, are like should be honored, revered, and learned from just as much as mystics or priestesses or goddesses. Like, and again, there are women, of course, Mary Magdalene being one, who was labeled a harlot as a way to discredit her. But the only reason why she was labeled that is because there's such a connotation for that word.
I am so grateful to hear you say this. So often people even on this show will get on here and be like, prostitute, but she was not a prostitute. And we all know, and still in that energy. And I'm like, it's very challenging for me to listen to that. And oh my gosh, my mind is pinging with 7 million things with everything you just said.
I have that effect on people.
We just in Embracing Your Arrows, we had a book launch earlier this year called Embracing Your Arrows. And in that book, a woman is a sex worker right now and wrote from her experience. And like, it was so powerful. And it was so inspiring to talk to her and to like sit in that space. I, like you, come from a previous Christian religion where I was really trapped up in purity culture. And like the idea of sitting at the feet of someone who is a sex worker and asking myself, what medicine does this person carry that I could gain from, that I could learn from?
Absolutely.
It is so different than how I was raised. And nevertheless, like the medicine just flows and flows. And I just like, it makes me sick that like this narrative still exists. And the main reason why she got the courage to write her story in this book, which she wrote under a pen name, completely understandable. But the main reason she has the courage to do that is because she wants to speak to rights for sex workers. And she wants to speak to the confidence for sex workers of like, hey, you are still a whole human and you deserve to have all the rights that, everyone else. And that's not always the case. And so like, this was the launch of her into activism as a sex worker. And I just like, so thank you for saying all of this.
Of course. And I think the thing is like, Mary Magdalene was wrongfully labeled a prostitute. And I do think that there is kind of like a righteous rage around, oh, you mislabeled a woman as a way to discredit her, and kind of that like she is not. And there can also be a baseline respect. And the thing that like, and this is again such an area of interest of mine, it's a lot of what I teach, a lot of where my work comes from. Prior to patriarchal religions and specifically Christianity, there were sacred sexual priestesses. There were priestesses. I was
wondering if you were going to go there. Here we go.
Oh, please, my favorite topic. There were priestesses who men would come to the temple and pay to have sex with them because they were seen as the embodiment of the goddess. This was a revered position in ancient society. These women held power, wealth, status. They were seen as the embodiment of the goddess. And paying to have sex with them was seen as like a sacred offering, right? And now simultaneously, there was also, for lack of a better word, common prostitution, right? At the same time in ancient societies. So you have sacred sexual priestesses. You probably also have some version of a courtesan. It was probably a different name, some kind of higher end person. And then you have the common prostitutes. And when patriarchal religion decided that, you know, it was so insecure with women being in power that it had to try and erase all of it, and it started to erase goddess temples, I believe, and I don't know that there really is historical evidence to back that up, but like, again, what's the evidence written by men? I think that they probably went after the sacred sexual priestesses first, because the best way to control women is to control us through our sexuality, which is why I believe patriarchal religion makes female sexuality not just wrong, but a sin. It makes it this moral failing that is destiny, like that is having you be destined to an afterlife of suffering.
Yeah.
Like, if our sexuality was not truly the core of our power, why would they be working so hard to make us terrified of it?
Well, and not only that too, but like the patriarchy is the root that has perpetuated sexual abuse and sexual trauma, and the the idea that our bodies are actually not our own. And so that objectification of, I mean, I think about enslaved people, and I think about like that objectification of women, and it's like it takes this to a whole nother level. And so I just I think it's so important what you're saying. And I also think it's important that, like, I come from this white lens, and I come from this background of elements of purity culture, elements of sexual oppression, even in my ancestry. But there are other people in the world who have even more intense stories when it comes to reclaiming sexuality. Like, it is such a thing. And I love, like, I think what I want to I'm thinking also as a listener right now, and I'm like, Lauren is actually not teaching people to become sex workers. That's not actually the work we're doing here. Lauren is helping, women leaders, women business owners, and things to step into their full power. She's a magnetic woman, all of these things. But I would love to hear you speak to working with women around sensuality and sovereignty. How do you intentionally create space for women whose lived experiences around sexuality and trauma and ancestry and the body may be very different from your own? Because I think this matters so much. And I see a lot of really well-intentioned white women who just only speak as if my lived experience is it's that centering of whiteness, right? Like, how do we get that? And I'm asking this question, I want to like preface, like, I'm asking this from a place of like, I am actively working these skills as well, and learning all the time.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's key, right? Is to know that we're always learning. And I am very upfront with like, this is my lived experience and XYZ is not my lived experience. And I also, have been doing this for a long time. And I have no problem saying, like, I don't know that I'm the best person to serve you. I don't know that I am the best person to mentor you or to guide you. And that's where I think having a really diverse community, like of peers and friends, is really important, because there are women that I can turn to and say, like, hey, this person came to me wanting to work on XYZ, and I don't know that I'm the best person for that. Do you have anybody that you would recommend? Do you know anybody that might be, more aligned for them? So I think the first is to like have it be okay that you aren't going to know everything, period. Now simultaneously we get to trust the sovereignty in other women. So if a woman comes to me and I'm like, that's not my lived experience, and they're like, right, and everything you talk about I love and I want to learn from you, like, you can trust women to make their own choices. But I think it's important to know what your own shortcomings are, and also what your boundaries are. Like, not just ways or spaces or areas where you're like, well, that might not be my lived experience, so I don't know that I'm best serving you. But also, like, at this point, I don't think I would best serve somebody who's just starting out on a spiritual journey. One, because that's not where my gifts are going to be best used. Like what I love to do and the women I love working with, like you've already done a lot of deconditioning and deconstructing about religion and the patriarchy. You've done personal development. You know how to work with your inner child. You know how to regulate your nervous system. So we get to go so deep so quickly, right? And if somebody comes to me and they're like, oh, I just like, have realized that Christianity is wrong or bad, or, it's like amazing. And I know I'm not going to enjoy hand holding them through deconstruction, So I think that it's like, yes, knowing your own limitations and knowing what your boundaries are as well, knowing what you like to talk about. And I've been talking recently a fair amount around reclaiming your spiritual ancestry, especially as a woman of white ancestry. And this is not I don't work with women of color or no, absolutely not. And there's a lot of white women, hopefully well-meaning, who learn different spiritual practices, typically of some kind of indigenous or people of color, or just spiritual practices that are found nowhere in their lineage.
No.
And essentially colonize them to make money off of it. And the truth is, we all have spiritual practices pre-Christian in our own ancestry and lineage that we can tap into, that is already like living within our energetic body, our DNA. And again, as I said, I was raised Catholic. Most of, as far back as you can look, people are raised Catholic in my lineage. And so it's like, what was, I come from like Irish and Southern Italian ancestry. So like, what were people in Southern Italy doing before Christianity? Like, okay, there was the Roman Empire, and like, what was that? What was before that? What were people in Southern Italy even doing spiritually during Catholicism, right? Because there's a lot of mixing and melding there. And okay, for Ireland, like the Celtic people were slaughtered and forced to convert to Christianity. And what were they doing before? And I think most people now are very are multicultural, especially here in the United States. It's very rare to find somebody that is 100% something. So for me, like my spiritual practice and journey recently has been picking things from different aspects of my spiritual ancestry to be like, this is really resonating with me right now. This is really resonating with me right now. And to me, that's my unique feminine wisdom, my unique feminine magic. And I believe that we all have a unique, like, imprint of feminine wisdom and magic that we're meant to bring through. Even and especially those of us working with Mary Magdalene, I think every single woman working with Mary Magdalene has her own facet, aspect, resonance of the Magdalene lineage that she's here to bring forward. And for me, part of that is that ancestral healing spiritually.
I really love that element, and agree with you that I see a lot of white women struggling, like starving, as you said, for roots and for belonging, and that work has been so meaningful for me as well. And I just want to add to what you said, both about like leadership and inclusive spaces, as well as connecting to spiritual traditions and things. Like, I think it's also, in my experience, has been so valuable to listen and learn from people's other lived experiences. And it's like, if there is a right relationship to a spiritual tradition from a person of color, that can be a really like beneficial thing. Like, go learn, but make sure there's a reciprocal relationship. Make sure there's like money paid, or that there's some kind of proximity, or that you understand the roots of where these traditions come from, and like the oppression that has happened for this spiritual gift to be handed to you at this time.
Well, and I think that there's a lot to be said, quite frankly, for education, like,
Yeah.
and for self-education, learning. And I'm somebody who loves to learn. I love watching documentaries. I love reading, and a lot of, unpacking my own white supremacy and whiteness has come through, quite frankly, watching historical documentaries, not whitewashed historical documentaries, right? But historical documentaries, or, you know, if you're really serious about it, it's like you have to decenter your own whiteness and read and learn from people of color. And that could be reading a biography of a woman of color, watching a documentary about, slavery. And I think it's important for a few things. One, knowing it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be confronting. It's going to bring up a lot of emotion in you, and like, okay, great. Be an emotionally responsible adult and figure out how to, work through that.
Yeah.
And two, knowing like a few things. For me, it's like at the end of the day, you have to know yourself. And it's like, there's so much that I don't know. And you have to be uncomfortable being essentially like ignorant or naive or misstepping or potentially offending somebody
Yeah.
unknowingly, right? And coming back to like, I also know who I am, that I would never maliciously
Yeah.
offend somebody. I would never on purpose try and hurt somebody with my words or actions. If my words or actions hurt somebody, right? It's like, okay, why? Why did I do that?
Yeah.
And so I think it comes down to having emotional regulation tools, having a community and support, and other peers and friends who are doing similar things and similar work, where you can talk to like women of color and white women, right? Like, oh my gosh, I just learned this XYZ, like, this is really uncomfortable, this is really heavy, like, I don't know what to do, and like, oh my gosh, have I hurt people in the past by just like not knowing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's also not on women of color to be our emotional support system as we unpack our own internalized white supremacy, and colonization and capitalism, right?
Yeah.
And so I think making sure you have the correct resources for yourself as well, and giving yourself permission to continually learn. Like, unfortunately, with social media and the internet, I think that there is this idea and expectation of consistent and constant perfection.
Yeah.
There is no error of margin, no ability to mess up. So many people are ready to rip you off the pedestal that they put you on. And you have to separate yourself from it. You know what I mean? You have to give yourself the grace to be human and to mess up.
And it's fascinating. I mean, for me, in my experience, it's like the human is what's the most spiritual. The more I
Absolutely.
delve into my spiritual practice, the more I'm like, it feels way more integrous to hold the unknown and to
Absolutely.
hold the I'm still a beginner forever like attitude than it is to pedestalize anything. And even, we were just talking about this in the last episode, but like this idea of what is perfection, it really is rooted in white supremacy. It's this like image of, yeah. So I have to say, I really appreciate everything that you just shared, and just
Yeah.
the way that you hold your work. And it's been surprising and delightful as I go through this journey of kind of, unraveling
Yeah.
what I once was and stepping into, deeper values and things, and like that this bridge of spirituality intersecting with race conversations and things is so rare. And so I want to thank you for where you're at in your work and in your journey, and just all that you've brought to this conversation. It's so
Yeah.
fun to talk to you because I feel like in many, many points we see things very similarly. And this
Absolutely.
conversation around pleasure in spirituality and just showing up so boldly and unapologetically. So I love what you shared. I want to ask one last question before we wrap up today, which is just if you knowing this is a Magdalene show,
Yeah.
and just kind of tapping into that place in yourself, what do you feel like the one thing is that Mary Magdalene would want women to know today?
Yeah. So this reminds me of a story. I had just led my own Magdalene pilgrimage to southern France, and while I was there, I bought these oils, right? Like anointing oils. So after I was in France, this was also right after I ended my last relationship. So I was like, I'm just staying in Europe. So I go to Italy. And if you've been to Italy, if you know Italy, I mean, through most of Western Europe, but Italy especially, there's a church everywhere, right? So I found myself staying in an Airbnb next to a church, which is, when I say next, like across the street, but when I say across the street, I mean, we're talking, these are not big streets. So it's Sunday morning and I am awoken to Mass. Now, again, when you're Catholic, Mass is the same, right? That is one thing, as I said, like boomeranging back to Catholicism, the ritual of Mass, knowing that it's all the same. Beautiful. So Mass is happening in Italian, but I know exactly what's happening in the Mass because it's a Catholic Mass. And I decide I'm going to be a cute little rebel. And I'm like, let me get my anointing oils and I'm going to do a self-pleasure practice with my Mary Magdalene oils while this Mass is happening next to me. Okay? Sometimes I like to be that rebellious. So there I am doing my self-pleasuring practice with my Magdalene oils. And I hear, suffering was never meant to be the offering. Pleasure was always the offering. And so when I think of what I want women to know or think of when it comes to Mary Magdalene is, imagine if you didn't see your suffering or pain as your offering to the divine. That's so patriarchal. The more you suffer, the more you prove through suffering, through pain, then the more quote unquote worthy you are of something good after you die. But what if pleasure, enjoyment, happiness, joy, aliveness, right? All of those words can be substituted for each other. What if that was your offering to the divine? How would you view your life differently? Now, that's not to say that you'll never experience hardship or heartbreak or suffer. No, that's part of the human existence.
Mm-hmm.
But what if you didn't define your identity, your worth, your goodness, your spirituality through how much you're suffering, but through how much pleasure you're experiencing?
Yum, yum, yum. Thank you for sharing that. That was the most epic way to round out this conversation.
Thank you.
Wow. I like the image of like, oh my God. I just love that so much.
Yeah.
And then it moved me to tears, that message.
Yeah.
Gosh, because that is and deconditioning and changing that. Oh, it is such an intimate work within oneself.
And
So it's so important what you're doing.
Thank you. And I guess one last thing on that vein or on that note is the path of the sacred feminine, which is what I label as my spiritual path. So in reverence to more of like the goddess versus a male god, working with Mary Magdalene, earth-based spiritual practices. It's a path of continual becoming. There is no arrival. Mm-hmm. Right? So even this idea of like, what if pleasure was the offering? That is a question that you get to ask yourself all day, every day. Mm. And then you forget that that's the point. And then you come back to it. Oh, right. What if pleasure was the offering? You go through a season of hardness, of a lot of struggle, of a lot of suffering. And then you remember, oh yeah, what if pleasure was the offering? Right. And so give yourself permission to be on this path of continual becoming, of continually forgetting and remembering, of continually coming back to your humanity as the spiritual practice. Because there is no arrival, there is no perfection.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for all that you've said
You.
today. Thank you to those of you who've tuned in, or if you're watching this on replay, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please let us know what you're thinking and feeling. And Lauren, you are running some big things. Why don't you make an invitation to my—
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay. So as I said, I have my Mystics, Harlots, and Heretics, which consider this like mystery school meets Goddish church. So we meet every other week, and every other week we focus on a mystic, harlot, or heretic, where we learn about them. We do somatic practices to activate their transmissions. So this Friday is none other than Mary Magdalene. I'm also leading my own Magdalene retreat at the end of September, and I do in-person one-on-one intensives called Legacy Intensives, which is a 3-day experience. And we travel to places like Rome and southern France, and we do this beautiful mix of bringing forward your next body of work or your legacy work through strategy, but also ritual and kind of this like reclamation of the forbidden and lost feminine in these spaces. So those are the things I have right now. And of course, feel free to just message me on social media. I love meeting new people and chatting.
So cool. And yeah, we discovered that Lauren's running her retreat to south of France. Like, I think we have like a day overlap or something.
Yeah. Like right after yours. So,
so cool.
It is amazing. And I think it's also just like such a testament of how it's clear how much the world needs the Magdalene lineage right now.
Yeah.
And it's such a testament to how many women are awake, attuned, open to it.
Yeah.
That there are so many options, and I have a lot of friends who are Magdalene priestesses and do Magdalene work. And the beautiful thing is none of us see each other as competition, because again, we each have our own transmission. And while some of those transmissions overlap, like we work from our own lived experience, our own spiritual ancestry, our own, embodied practices day in and day out. And so also, if you're on this journey with Mary Magdalene, it's like, it's okay if you're following a bunch of us that sound the same in a lot of ways, or, you know what I mean? Like, you get to take something from everybody too. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, wonderful. So check her out. We've got your Linktree link in the description and everything. And just appreciate you so much for being on the show. Thanks again, guys. And we'll see you next time on the Magdalene interview series.
Thank you.